Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Planet Dirt, written by TheCurserHasntMoved. It is an unfortunate fact that the debate bro not only refused to die, but apparently thrived on every single planet with something like an internet. And worse yet, it went up like a lantern dropped in a hay barn when multiple species of sapiens connected their interplanetary networks. Save us from the lowest common denominator. However, amongst the catastrophic trend that absolutely refused to die, there was a stream that fleetingly approached intellectual stimulation. What is the whole galaxy wrong about was a simple enough premise. A doctor of xenoanthropology from a six-eyed, eight-limbed, manners-observed Invari hosted and brought on a panel of charismatic streamers from other races to face off against one brave sod who would flail about to try and make their personal, national, or species point in the face of overwhelming polite ridicule. Surprising to only the aforementioned lowest common denominator, that brave sod actually eked out a victory just over 20% of the time, and only the most savvy of viewers had an inkling that occasionally the polite professor deliberately chose an opponent for the panel who had a point in order to help dispel mistaken stereotypes. The dirtling guest was not such an occasion, not on purpose. Ura, entertaining and entrepreneurial academic, fully expected a dirtling, or human as they prefer, to be another example of their famously drunk and sweaty flow rider mans, which must be incredibly common to gain such notoriety. Since our professor, who goes by the pseudonym Modresser, the delightfully clever mashings of the trade English words of moderator and professor, mashed together with all the grace of smashing a russet and sweet potato together and calling it a new dish, had written a whole one paper on the flow rider man's phenomenon based on the news articles they filtered out of planet Dirt, the Terran Republic, or Federated Planets, and across the connected galaxy without ever finding the original reports or visiting the distant world himself. He was confident in his knowledge of Dirtlings and their culture. Surely, such an educated being should be immune to confirmation bias, expectancy bias, and primacy bias. He was a xenoanthropologist, after all. Consequently, he chose his opposing panelists for their popularity within humor metrics rather than something more useful like intellectual challenge metrics or even diplomatic conversation metrics. This is why Dr. Matthew Fujika narrowed his eyes when he saw what was the cultural equivalent of neckbeards with cheetah dust stained in the panelist section of the overlay on his holotable. Modresser was confident that since the dirtling didn't immediately flip him off, the suffering doctor hadn't noticed the calculated insults towards the first human academic brought onto his show. He was, after all, a published expert on dirtling culture, so he got on with the business of starting the show, which he deliberately scheduled to give the guests no time to establish rapport or stream. In this case, it wasn't an insult but a new guest tradition, a sort of baptism by fire, or rather, whatever his cultural equivalent idiom would be. "Hello and welcome, loyal viewers," he began, as Dr. Fujika tried not to glare at his fellow guests. "I am your host, Modresser, and I brought 3 fan favorites of our panelists today. Big 42066969, the frame around an avian head with ruffled and unkempt feathers, and a hooked seed-crushing beak lit up helpfully. Inglorious Traveler, a head that in all likelihood isn't meant to have the folded ridge, the fat drooping over 3 edges, or the 3 chins under the meat-tearing tusks drooping below its glistening lips was indicated. And, of course, 00 Unbreakable Carapace 00, he finished, as the last of the panelist frames helpfully indicated what Dr. Fujika could only approximate to a beetle with peanut butter smeared on its mandibles and compound eyes. For the sake of everybody's sanity, their scream names were all pronounced as if they were actual words and were translated when possible so that audiences were spared the spine-crushing cringe induced by reading out gamer tags aloud verbatim. "And now, for the first time, as a contender," Modresser lit up. Dr. Fujika's name for the audience said, "Matt." This was another insult that even the most drunken of the Flow Rider mans couldn't help but notice. But even still, one of the panelists, Beak 42066969, helpfully pointed it out for the pleasure of the viewers.
Your parents named you a carpet. That's egg-breaking stupid.
Modressa was fully prepared to just lean back and enjoy the inevitable shit show, practically guaranteed by such a profane insult to a dirtling. Dr. Fujika didn't even flush with an amusing anger display. Instead, he coldly replied, "No, they did not. My name is Dr. Matthew Fujika, and I allow my friends to truncate my first name. As we are not acquainted, I will thank you to address me as Dr. Fujika." Chat was immediately full of vulgar insults directed towards Big 42066969, who had made the mistake of keeping a chat window open to enjoy watching the human getting mocked on an interstellar stage. Therefore, he was very quickly flustered enough to press the attack.
Dr. Floweridge, and you think that's less stupid?
Somehow Dr. Fujika spoke even more coldly. "I shall now inform you of the significance of the meme numbers in your name, Beak. 420 refers to an intoxicant plant imbibed via smoke inhalation, and is associated with laziness and gluttony. And the 69 is a number that refers to a sexual position involving mutual oral stimulation of the genitals. If we're having a stupid name contest, I happily concede." Big 4206969's feathers somehow looked even more ruffled, and he rubbed his head in agitation while Modressa swooped in to save him.
No, we are not comparing our online tags in a cringe contest. Those of us who go by screen names or gamer tags know that cringe is pretty much a universal tradition. Since we are here to learn what the entire galaxy is wrong about and what you are right about, what this is depends mainly on you, Dr. Fujika.
My contention is twofold. In the first place, my planet is not named Dirt, and in the second place, naming it Earth is not a uniquely human naming convention. Chat exploded. Humanity, with the knowledge that their champion would be on, had a sizable chunk of the audience, so there were innumerable insults directed to human-coded screen names, while said humans voiced their anticipation of the upcoming intellectual slaughter with varying degrees of profanity. The Legion of Mods was hard-pressed to keep the vitriol within the site's TOS, and on top of that, the explanation of Big 4206969's name had attracted the porn bots, an absolute cluster. The panel was little better, since they simply howled with laughter as Modressa affected a dispassionate patience, which allowed him to keep up appearances of a good manners while still propping up laughing stocks for ridicule. To his chats and the panel's chagrin, Dr. Fujiko simply waited with patience. Since the dirtling had failed to live up to the racial stereotype, Unbreakable Carapace helpfully pointed out,
"My translator seems to have had told you that your planet is not named Dirt, but it is named Dirt."
"Dirtlings are like that," Inglorious Traveller mocked smugly. "Different hoots for the same rotted concept." "Well, you over-blubbered space wars. If we're going to drop any pretense at manners, I suggest you clean the clam grease out of your whiskers before casting stones," he shot back coldly before going on. "We have many words with overlapping meanings, not multiple words with the same precise meaning. Very much like the language spoken by our esteemed host." The mods were timing people out as fast as their interfaces would allow, but the admin VIs still were attracted to the ensuing torrent of profanity and racial slurs brought on by the brief exchange of racial insults, and their banhammers were hot. It was the absolute best possible result for Modressa, since the super chats were flowing so fast that even those couldn't be read with any reliability. His show gained 12 new sponsors, and his subscribers shot past the 100 billion mark. That sapphire play button was finally his. These material facts made it rather easy for him to cordially say, "Indeed, the humans are not the only ones whose languages have synonyms, and a full 36.7394 repeating languages catalogued have that very same feature." Once again, it was Unbreakable Carapace who filled the breach.
"Please elucidate the difference between the words."
"Gladly. Dirt refers to those loose mineral deposits on the surface of our crust, though it is sometimes used to include compounds including some biomass. Earth, on the other hand, encompasses all of the features of our planet's crust, and it did so before we understood the makeup of our world. It is the foundation we build on. It is the fertile ground from which crops spring. It is the rugged prairies that pasture our livestock. It is not just base minerals. It is everything beneath our feet. Having somewhat recovered from his previous humiliation, Big Beak 4206969 essayed another jab.
So basically, you're insisting that your planet's name is slightly less stupid than everybody says.
No, Dr. Fujiko said icily. Pay attention. First, I insist on the proper nomenclature, and hopefully the reach of this platform will help with the various translator algorithms, and thus lessen the irritation of humans everywhere. Second, I contend that the naming convention is common, rather than unique example of humanity's alleged stupidity.
Name one other planet named after the ground.
The disheveled duster shot back. Well, OI literally translates to ground. If you use the same uncharitable standards applied to the cradle world, there is also the Gendian, Resian, Bjork, and Evermem, all of which are cradle worlds whose names can be translated as ground.
Well, that's not fair.
Inglorious Traveler interjected.
Reslan doesn't just mean
Earth doesn't just mean the ground either. Fine. So there are other places just as dumb as dirtlings. The blubberbound retorted. Care to tell the audience what you hear when I describe liquid dihydrogen monoxide as water? Amunda. Why? Amunda is your cradle planet's name. You come from planet water. Go suck rot, dirtling. Swim off some blubber. Mordressa deftly muted Inglorious Traveler the very instant he began to screech in incoherent rage and flail his flabby fins around in a vain attempt to physically assault Dr. Fujika. Chat mocked him without mercy. Once again showing that she isn't an idiot, Unbreakable Carapace interjected.
Before you pointed out, Bifna might translate to the word for insect nest in your language, since it can also be used that way in mine. However, when referring to our cradle world, the word is deeper, just as Earth is for you, Dr. Fujiko.
Thank you, Unbreakable Carapace. That's the main point I've been trying to get across. We didn't name our planet the way we did because we're the only spacefaring race to be actually stupid. It has a logical name for the first planet that we ever knew of, and named before we even knew what a planet was.
Just like everybody else,
Mordressa interjected, hoping to end the debate before Dr. Fujika could go in for the cradle planet name kill shot, his own EO, which he had realized to his horror translates to place in most languages.
Would you be amendable to return to discuss the Flow Rider Man's phenomenon at a later date, Dr. Matthew Fujiko?
I read your paper on the subject, and to be frank, I'm eager to respond to it amongst a more scientific panel. He replied with a smug grin that seemed to lord over the entire galaxy with humanity's latest victory. End of story. I would like to thank the T5 peeps, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Bushmaster 177, Leslie 517, Red Panda 121, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Lightjock, Dragzoon WRE, Lord Azrakal, Severin Cerberus, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.